Something very strange happened in the world of Warhammer Plus this week. For the first time since launch date, we get two masterclasses. One about painting Tyrannid Chitin, and the other one was part 3 of the Avatar painting series. This is very interesting to me for two reasons. Number one would be that it shows that GW is very interested in releasing at least one tutorial or video related to their big releases coming out, and this one would obviously be the Tyrannid Codex. This week's episode of Lore Masters is also about Tyrannid invasion swarms, so that ties in nicely as well. It does add a bit of excitement to these releases. And number 2 is a bit of speculation on my part. It maybe shows that GW are now confident in the amount of content that they can produce, because GW of a couple of months ago for Warhammer Plus would have held one of these tutorials back for another week to pad it out, but this time they just released both in 1 week, and that's great to see. I think it really does suggest that maybe they've caught up in their production cycle and they're now producing enough stuff. While I love the extra content, I'm not going to get too excited about it because I just don't know if it'll last. It was a nice surprise though. It's also a little bit sad that I'm excited about 3 shows rather than 2, because it shows just how far our expectations have fallen, that we think that is a good week. So it's still got a long way to go, but it's a step on the way. Last week I ran a poll on Interrogator episode 1 just to see how well it had been received. And don't worry, I'm not going to read too much into this. It's a small sample size, I know, but I still thought the results were quite interesting enough to share at least. First of all, I want to say thanks to everyone that responded, all 69 of you. Most of the responses were positive, which is great news. I really enjoyed it, but I also like to know that other people enjoyed it as well. A few people thought it was absolutely awful, but that's to be expected, just because it's different strokes for different folks. You can't please everyone all of the time, everyone's got different tastes, so it's to be expected that a few people wouldn't like it. For me it shows great promise, and we get the follow-up episode next week, which I'm really looking forward to. I hope it can maintain the momentum, but it can't be declared a classic just yet. Warhammer Vault seems to be settled on 1 book and 2 White Dwarves a week, which I'm absolutely fine with. This week's book is a bit of a mouthful. It's Imperial Armour, Imperial Guard, 2nd edition. There's a lovely little field recognition guide showing tank silhouettes, there's fluff, there's paint schemes, there's company markings, there's tons in this book. I've got a Lehman Russ that I was working on a colour scheme for, and it's basically red. It wasn't really working for me. A quick flick through this book and I've got inspiration for another colour scheme. I'm basically going to put corn red camouflage markings on it, and I think that'll look great. So that took, 3 minutes to find an alternative colour scheme for what I was working on, and I was totally stuck before. I've got a Baneblade to build and paint as well, so the success of this colour scheme dictates whether I'll go with the red or I'll do something else maybe from this book as well. I've also got my eye on the Duncan Rhodes Krieg colour scheme. His Baneblade was absolutely stunning and it didn't look too difficult to do, so I might go down that road as well. It's a tricky decision and I'd love to hear what you think about it. The first White Dwarf is from June 2010 and it features a Warhammer 40k expansion called Spearhead, which is all about tank-on-tank warfare. I don't remember this at all. My mind's blank. It seems to be down the same route as the City Fight expansions, all that kind of thing. The releases for that month back in 2010 were Imperial tanks, there were Lehman Russes, Manticores, Death Strikes, and there were Elder tanks as well. So there was the Fire Prism and the Night Spinner, I think it is. So they look really great. They're obviously still around today, but I don't remember Spearhead at all. You can tell me in the comments below if you played it and if it was any good or not. The second White Dwarf was July 2010, and it's more old world nostalgia. I don't know why they're doing this to me. They're just pulling at my heartstrings the whole time. It was all about the Warhammer Fantasy rulebook, new templates, new magic cards, all that kind of thing. I don't know if it was a new edition, but it just brought back so many memories anyway. As mentioned earlier, Lore Masters was all about Tyrannid invasion swarms. It was short at 17 minutes, and if you've ever read the fluff in a Tyrannid Codex, then you've basically seen this Lore Masters. There's lots to love about it. It explains that Genestealer cults go out dozens and dozens of years before the fleet arrives at a planet. They've to basically seed the planet and make it a lot easier to take over so that the Tyrannids can absorb all the biomass on the planet, which is really cool. Also, the total unfeeling, unrelenting nature of the Tyrannids makes them absolutely terrifying enemies to face. There have been so many strategies tried to stop the advance of a big hive fleet, like Inquisitor Cryptman bombed a whole load of planets, killed everyone in the planets, just so there was no biomass for the Tyrannids to absorb, and he thought that might stop them. It didn't. And then there's a whole Octarius thing where he put the Tyranids against basically unkillable orcs, and when orcs fight they become bigger, so this was a huge mistake. The orcs gave the Tyranids more biomass, the Tyranids made the orcs stronger, so now they've got 2 really strong enemies to face instead of 1. Seems like a really bad idea. It seems like the only way the Imperium have actually got to stop a hive fleet is to throw everything they've got at it and hope it's enough. So all in all, not the best lore masters for me, but it must be an absolute goldmine for people new to the hobby that want to know about Tyranids. On to the first masterclass, and that feels weird to say. I always thought the armoured plates on Tyranids were called chitin. I had only ever read it, I'd never heard it pronounced. When Louise Sugden pronounced it chitin, I thought she'd made a mistake. I went and looked it up. Turns out she was absolutely right, and you learn something new every day. I liked the technique in this one. It didn't seem overly complex, but I have to admit I really didn't like the finished article. The bright spots on it they didn't look that great to me. It might have been because it wasn't a finished model that we saw, it was just the armour plates, so you can't really get a feel for what the overall thing would look like. I think it's Leviathan that are normally the purple plated ones. They've got like creamy bodies. I don't know if that would be the same for this colour scheme. That might work, they might have something else in mind, but whatever it was, it just didn't look quite right. Can only judge on what we're shown though. I also thought it would have been good to see a few schemes rather than just one, because if you don't like that one, then you're out of luck basically. The third part of the avatar tutorial was fantastic. I've said it before, but I think these avatar tutorials are what masterclass should be. It's a really in-depth look at painting one really big, really nice model with all the techniques that go along with it. The big technique in this one was freehand, and it's something I've never seen before with the loincloth. First of all, it was painted a really nice white, and that was a 70-30 mix of White Scar and Corax white. It looked really, really good. I'll be using that in the future. But the thing that really got my attention was the freehand for a complicated Eldar rune. And he basically put dots where all the corners should be, and then joined the dots. I'd never seen that before. So simple. It looked fantastic. Yeah, I loved it. The avatar ended up looking absolutely stunning as well. See if we could get one simple tutorial like the chitin one, and one really in-depth tutorial like the avatar one. I would be a happy man. Obviously in conjunction with all the other things we're meant to be getting. We're meant to be getting one of each show, in case I haven't mentioned it before. But I think that would be a really good way for Masterclass to go. So all in all, this week wasn't too bad. Obviously no animation, but we did get a Lore Masters and 2 Masterclasses, which was unusual. So I'm looking forward to next week when we get part 2 of the Interrogator, and hopefully it lives up to the hype. So thanks for watching, happy hobbying, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.